Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. We're part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Luke Wyatt. He will talk about Vanderbilt's 55-0 loss to Georgia and put that in some historical perspective. Of course, Luke worked at Vanderbilt for about 45 years, knows that football program backwards and forwards, and I think today's conversation will be an interesting one. Luke Wyatt appears on our guest line that is presented by Michael Kendrick of the Kendrick Group. Michael is a local carpenter and lifelong Vandy fan. He builds bookshelves, cabinets, picture frames, furniture, and made-to-order items, including a display case for my prized Dale Murphy jersey. I've seen Michael's work. He's a true craftsman. If you're in the market for custom woodwork, give Michael a call at 615-830-9458. Now on to our conversation with Luke. Luke Wyatt joins us on a Monday morning. Luke, frankly, the perfect person to join us today. Luke worked at Vanderbilt full or part-time from 1974 to 2018. He has seen the gamut of the best of Vanderbilt football and certainly the worst of it. Luke, thanks for joining us today after what was a very long weekend for Vanderbilt and Athens, losing 55-0. I think the fan base right now is, goodness, there's, you never say it's the lowest it has been, because I mean I've seen it lower within the last couple of years, but certainly I don't think demoralizing does it justice what the last three games have done to this team.
Right. Chris, it's the cumulative effect of the 3-2. And I don't say, and again, I'm not trying to say poor, pitiful Vanderbilt, but I don't know of any school, and I think back many years, that have done what we've had to do and play those three teams consecutively to all top 10 teams. And it's a time two number ones. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And of all the teams in the Southeastern Conference, we're the last team that needs to be having to do that. Now, how that schedule fell is just bad luck again. I don't know, but it's the cumulative effect. I think that's what you saw in the fourth quarter Saturday. Was they were done. They were cooked. And I know Clark doesn't want to hear that, and he hates it, but it wears on any human being. It really would. And especially when basically it's amateurs against pros at some point in those in two of those three contests anyway, in my opinion.
You say we're done. Do you think that team quit late? I'll be honest, I quit late. I was watching Tennessee, Alabama, which was a fascinating game. I've got an SEC channel that I run to be able to make enough to do this. So before anybody judges me on that, that's just my life these days. But when you're watching that, are you seeing a team that just threw in the towel at the end? Because I didn't think the effort from what I did see was what it maybe could have been.
But the word quit, I hate to use that because that's pretty harsh. I don't know that it's quit as much as it is demoralized. I think that's something that, and again, I know Clark didn't want to hear it, but that's it. When you have kids that for 3 straight weeks, they, football, and I said this to Clark, football is a tough sport to play without the reward of winning. And I know they've won 3 games, but they realize they're in the SEC, they're no dummies, and they realize, okay, this is the level we have to get to compete for a championship, and they see the gulf in there and how far it is. That can be tough on kids, and kids are resilient. I don't worry about the hangover for the future, and even this weekend I don't. But I do think that the kids were demoralized, not necessarily that they quit, but that they were demoralized. That's the way I'd like to describe it.
Well, this is a reality check here. Missouri, I think, in most people's opinion, certainly in mine, the 13th best team in the SEC. In other words, the next to worst, Vanderbilt, of course, would be everybody's pick for the worst team right now. The line on that
Right.
one right now, 14.5 14.5 points. Now, look, if you want to nitpick a little bit, you usually get 3 points for being the home team. So that means Vegas thinks that Missouri's about 11.5 better. But, I mean, you talk about the gulf between them and the top. That's a pretty wide gulf between them and everybody else right now. And I think that's the part that's probably as disheartening as the rest of it.
Right. I look at it this way, too. All right, let's go back for just a second to the Georgia. And, you can always make comparisons and score comparisons. And something I look at, I know Georgia and Missouri was actually a good football game, and Missouri led for a lot of it. But every Saturday is different. The kids react different. That's the one thing, being on the sideline and being involved for 40 years, that I realized a lot of times, and I can't exactly put my finger on it, but you can tell in pregame how you're going to play. Not necessarily what the score is going to be and if you're win or lose, but how you're going to approach the football game. And I think that happens with these kids. I mean, look, Georgia beat a Oregon team by what, 45 to 50, almost as much as they beat us.
49-3.
And they're sitting there in the top 10. They beat them by 46 points, beat us by 55. So, or does that mean we're 9 points, less than Oregon? No, of course it doesn't. So I don't know that by making a Vegas line, what Vegas wants is for half the people to bet on Missouri and half to bet on Vanderbilt. So last year's final score, I think we lost by 9 points and had a chance to win it in the fourth quarter. I look at it more like that. I think that's the type of game it should be. Whether it will or not, we'll find out. But I don't pay much mind to the Vegas lines. It's just like Tennessee being a 9-point underdog to Alabama Saturday was ridiculous. There was no way it's a 9-point game either way, I didn't think.
Here's what I don't get. I know it's not linear. I know at some point when you run up against better athletes, there's just you can't do this. But like I watched Akron in Georgia.
Right.
Or was it? No, I'm sorry. Was it Kent State? It was Kent State. Excuse me. Wrong MAC team.
Yeah, it's like 17 points, 39-22. Yeah.
And it was anybody's game early in the fourth quarter, and Akron just kind of, Kent State just kind of, I thought, took it to Georgia and wasn't intimidated and looked like it could score, and it did. And Vanderbilt has now lost 55-0 and 62-0 or whatever it was last year to Georgia, 55-3 to Alabama. I just don't understand why. I'm not expecting them to win those games, but can he not get within 30? Is that out of the question? I don't understand just the complete and utter. Like, look, they beat Hawaii 63-10. I know it's a totally different game, but how? I mean, point is, they scored some at Northern Illinois. Again, not the same, but that's a MAC team that's not far off from what Kent State is probably. I do not understand the complete disconnect between performance other places and the complete inability to. I mean, they didn't have a first down in the second half till midway through the fourth quarter. Just the complete ineptitude as it translates. Like there should have been a little more resistance, I thought, against Georgia and Alabama, and you saw the same thing a year ago.
Well, again, I go back to the cumulative effect of playing the 3 games in a row. I don't think it's necessarily Georgia. If you play Georgia in the middle of after an off week and play them in the middle of after you played Northern Illinois, I don't think it would have been 55-0. In fact, Saturday, if you look, we left at least 10 points on the field, possibly 17, with the drop pass by Shepard, the missed field goal by Bullovas, and then there was the fumble by McGowan. At Vanderbilt, when you do those things against anybody, you usually lose. So when you do them against the number 1 team in America, you're gonna have what you have. Now, I can remember the Peach Bowl team, and a lot of people on here may not, but some of your elder people like myself can remember. They got beat 41-0 to Georgia, and it could have been a lot worse. They got beat same type of Alabama that year, but yeah, they wound up winning 7 games and going to the Peach Bowl. So I don't scores don't mean that much to me. It's how they play and how you're saying. How can it be so pitiful where you just hand the ball off and you can't? It's like running into a stone wall. You get nothing in the run game, the pass game. You don't even attempt to do some things. Being the third game of those, I felt like this one was going to be the worst. I really did going in. It did. This one didn't surprise me. I was more upset after the Alabama game, I think, with the way they played than anything, because it was the first one.
Yeah, and I feel like that expectation was kind of built in. But at the same time, like, you watch it, and I understand why people are upset.
Oh, I do too. Trust me, I'm upset. It's sickening and it's heart wrenching. But and here's the double-edged sword too. Vandy pretty much has a lot of smart kids. Okay, they're not stupid. They know when they play Alabama, my goodness, we've got to be perfect. We've got to be perfect just to have a chance to stay within 2 or 3 touchdowns. That's where the program is right now. And not to beat on Derek Mason, but I got to tell you, I've been at Vandy a long, long time. This is lower than the lowest point I saw it before, and the lowest ebb I saw before was 76 through 81 when we lost either 30 or 32 straight conference games. This is where the program was when Clark took it over. And to get that to turn around in today's culture and today's environment with the NIL and stuff, this is a massive job, folks, for anybody. And I would ask you this, Chris, and ask our fans this and the people on the board, who do you think, if you could pull a coach right now and say, okay, I want this to be our coach tomorrow. Let's just say, let's take Heupel at Tennessee. Okay, he's this offensive guru. Do you think he could put up points against Georgia with our players right now?
I think he could put up more than 0, but
we can say that, but at the same time, if you're here and you've gone through 2 other weeks of this, and you go to a 3rd week of it, and I know how kids think because I talked to these kids over the years. They'd come into the equipment room and we're getting ready to head to Georgia, and we just lost 3 in a row, or whoever it may be at the time. And part of my role was kind of like my name at Vanderbilt was Uncle Luke. So they'd come to me for solace or just to, get picked up maybe sometime. And I'd tell them, like, guys, they put on their pants just like you do. They may be faster, but hey, if they fumble today, if they're not ready to play and you go out there and give your best effort, you don't know what's going to happen. I've seen games where teams turn it over 7 times, but these kids are smart and they realize what they're up against. And I, again, go back to this. I feel like game 3 of this, the Georgia game, was going to be the worst. And I think it was.
Is there any getting morale back for the rest of the season after this?
Well, that's my big concern. I feel good about this weekend. I really do. I think that Missouri, yeah, of course, obviously everyone thinks they're a lot better than us because they stayed with Georgia. I have realized that comparing scores means absolutely nothing most of the time. But I will tell you this. There is games, and I said this to Clark after the game. I texted this to Clark. I said, you've got to flush it. The kids have to flush it because y'all have games in front of you that are winnable and that you can get to the 4th quarter and have a chance to win. Whether they win them or not, I don't know. But they have an opportunity to do that. That's where the program is right now. We're in year 2. Clark's been there a little over a year, started with absolutely nothing. In my opinion, the worst roster, and I don't mean this against the kids. It's not their fault. But the worst roster in Vanderbilt football history was last year to start that season. And at least in the 50 years that I've known Vanderbilt football. So that's where you're starting from. And we've had a lot of low ebbs, as you know. I can remember losing to Kentucky 53-2, a mediocre Kentucky team, 53-2. So it's not, the scores don't bother me as much as, yes, can we turn this around, give a max effort at Missouri, cut out all the mistakes? I think so, because I think the kids think in their mind, we can play with Missouri.
A couple of things here. You mentioned that the players on this team are smart, and I agree. That seems to me, Luke, almost like a curse in a spot like this because, like you said, they're not dumb. They understand the talent gap. They understand what getting beat by 50-something points means. The defense can certainly see the scoreboard. Is being smart an obstacle in this case, and how do you get around that?
No, I agree with you, Chris. I think it can be an obstacle. That's the reason why that's Clark's job and those coaches' jobs to make sure they understand it's a totally different animal we're playing this weekend. We can do better. We can do a heck of a lot better than what we've done, and they do know that too. They also know that Georgia may be 55 points better than them, but if we'd have executed in the first half those 3 plays that I've made mention of, that game wouldn't have been 55-0. There'd probably been 48-17. You still lost. It doesn't matter, but it feels a lot better to you. And of course, listen, I know how our fans feel. The ones that are left, I was so happy and excited that the crowd at the Ole Miss game, I felt like our crowd for the first time had more than the other conference team, and that was exciting. And we played a great first half. Those first halves have to be stacked together, and that's the next challenge for Clark. It's stacking good play on top of good play. Right now, it's too spotty, and part of that is because of talent. And I don't know how you fix that except continually playing.
Okay, Luke, you mentioned last year being the worst roster you've ever seen associated with Vanderbilt football. I think I don't quite go back as far as you do, but I would agree with that. And I do think to some extent you have to stop giving everybody that crutch. I don't like their defensive schemes at all, and that's a topic I'm sure we'll get into later. And I think that has some effect on things. But yes, the roster pool was not good. That was beyond his control. You cannot get a quick fix in the transfer market. At Vanderbilt, you can get some holes plugged, but just with the restrictions and things, there's just going to be some things that you can do at other schools you can't do at Vanderbilt, and that has nothing to do with him. With that, I want to backtrack a little bit. You were there under Derek Mason. From the stuff I was hearing almost immediately, I'm just thinking there's no way this can work. I know they knew some of that stuff too, because I would talk to people at times and go, okay, what this is going on, that's going on. How is the guy going to win if he's that incompetent? And they whistled past the graveyard for 7 years, and they reaped the benefit of it. When did you know? But anyway, when did you know that wasn't going to work, and why did they just sit in that mess for so long? This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing. It's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible.
That's the thing. We talk about good hires and bad hires, and we can get to this later on. I think I saw a question in the mailbag about James Franklin. Obviously, James won 9 games 2 of his 3 years there and went to a bowl all 3. When Derek Mason was hired, I didn't think it was that bad of a hire. I didn't know Derek. I did know someone at Stanford and talked to him about Derek, and all they said was he's a good man. So that doesn't tell you anything either about his football prowess. I think Derek at the time, of course, everyone after the Temple game, everybody was like, oh my gosh, what have we done? But then people have to remember, and I don't care about who's down and all that. If you want to say that, you can say that all day. But Derek did something nobody else did. Beat Tennessee 3 years in a row. That's one reason he stayed there. Now, I will tell you, I think he had one of the top 3 offensive coordinators that I've seen at Vanderbilt, and Coach Ludwig. I will tell you that. And that had a whole lot to do with it. And you had a guy in Cal Shermer who absolutely owned Tennessee and was a very, very, very good quarterback. Had he been at a place like a Georgia or Alabama, he's a national championship type quarterback. That's how good he was, I thought. So for the first 3 or 4 years, I get why Derek Mason kept his job. But when you realize that he had, quote, and maybe I'm wording this wrong, but I'll go ahead and say it. But you've heard me say this before. He was listening to the wrong people or person for getting his advice on everything. And you can't do that. I don't care who you are. If you think Nick Saban listens to anybody else, you're nuts. And when that happened, we started doing things recruiting-wise that was ill-advised. We started doing things with the kids. The way they ignored former players, didn't want them around, was absolutely ludicrous. And it makes me sick. And that's why Clark is trying his best to fix all of that. When you have to fix all of that as well as try to win football games, that's a mammoth undertaking. And it's going to take a little time. And I know everybody hates to hear that phrase. It's going to take a little time. But I felt like, to get back to answering your question, I felt like after that 2017 season, 18 season when we beat Tennessee, you could see it, even though we beat Tennessee at the end, I felt between 18 and 19, it was not going to be good for the future.
Okay, can you elaborate on some of that, like who he was listening to and those sorts of things? I think I probably have some idea, but maybe not all of it.
Oh, absolutely. Jason Grooms was his operations person. And in my opinion, Jason was running the program. If I was in the media and I wanted an answer to anything, I would have gone to Jason Grooms. He knew more about what was going on than Derek did. And I know that sounds brutal, and I'm sure Derek would hate me for saying that. But it is what it is. After he had been there a few years, and this happens to a lot of coaches at Vanderbilt, they say, my goodness, okay, I think I've hit my high water mark. I got to listen to somebody else to try to figure out how to get to another level. We got to a bowl game, got to the Texas Bowl, got to the Independence Bowl. That's about all I can get out of Vanderbilt. So now what can we do different? So you start all these wild-looking uniforms. You do all this stuff with players, that mental games you're playing with them. You know, it was just not – I don't want to be specific on kids' names. I'm not going to do that. But I just felt like Jason Grooms was running the show, and Derek was his puppet.
I don't want to get too far off in the weeds here, but what I heard, and I don't know exactly who to believe, and you were gone at the time, but you were connected. I've heard Grooms was the one that was the mastermind behind Sarah Fuller, excuse me.
I heard the same thing, because I asked everybody I knew and trusted, and I heard the same thing. They were looking for anything. His quote was, and he would tell you this probably today still maybe, any publicity at this time is good publicity, which is asinine. I mean,
yeah,
that's where we were. We were at the bottom of the barrel. We were at dregs. But the main thing that I had concern with, not so much the Sarah Fuller thing, was how we were taking other kids from other schools, and basically you're just inheriting other kids' problems, other teams' problems. You were cherry picking kids that were cancers on other teams and bringing them into your locker room. And it doesn't work at a place like Vanderbilt.
Where did that call come from?
That's the Grooms telling Mason that's the route we should take to get to instead of being 5-7 and 6-6. That's what we got to do to get to be winners.
Yeah,
which
is how you get Alex Stump and Alex Williams and a lot of those kids, I guess.
Got it. You got it.
Okay, let me get us back on the here and now. Any other thoughts on kind of Saturday and the last 3 weeks before we go to the mailbag? I mean, I've got a lot of things I'm thinking, a lot of things I can say, but I really want to let you do most of the talking today, because I think there's probably not a person in the world that's more suited to assess where they are and what they've been through and history and everything and how that all ties together than you. So what have we missed so far that we need to get into?
If I wanted to be a fly on the wall and I said I want to gauge the temperature of where we're at now, I would love to be over there for the very next practice, which I don't know if that was yesterday or today or tomorrow for Missouri, because you can gauge the temperature by the body language of the kids when they walk out of the locker room. Are they taking their time buckling their pads? Are they got their heads down, sliding their helmets on slowly, or are they popping their helmets on and got a little pep in their step and walking out? Honestly, you can tell by that. I know that sounds silly, and here's where that comes from, guys. I was an equipment manager for all the years except for my final 5 years when I was more in an administrative role with all sports. And after a drubbing, that's the first thing I wanted to see would be stand at that equipment room window and watch all the 85 or 100 kids come in and see what their body language is like and see who's pointing fingers and who's saying, man, I wish this crap was over with. We got 5 more weeks and this and that. You know, where are we? If he has kids doing that, then you have an issue. Because if you go out against Missouri and you get beat 55-10, you got a huge problem. But if you go out and play competitively like we should, possibly win the game like we could, then those 3 weeks are forgotten real fast. Because we all said, well, not all of us, but most of us said, if we win a conference game and win 4 games this year, that's progress. And I feel that way myself.
Oh, I do too. Look, if they pick anybody off in the conference, 4 wins is a really good season. I don't care what happened in the rest. It's just, to me, it's can you get over what just happened? And I don't know that he'll ever face much tougher circumstances than what he's dealing with this week.
You won't. You won't. That's a historic thing. That's as historic as Alabama getting 18 penalties Saturday in Knoxville. It's never happened before. That you will not see a team have to play 3 top 10 teams in a row again, especially when you're right in the midst of a rebuild, a total rebuild. You know, rebuilding at Vanderbilt is a lot different than rebuilding at, say, Tennessee. Look how much Tennessee has struggled. You know, they had their celebration Saturday after beating Alabama. Let's just compare that for a second. A mere 4 years ago, we were beating them like a drum. They were 0-8 in the league. It can change a lot quicker than you think. But at Vanderbilt, it takes a little more time than it does at a state school or a football school, so to speak.
Well, and I think that has compounded things. What happened and what is happening in Knoxville, you see how quickly Tennessee not just got competitive in football, but Tennessee's in the running for the playoff. The baseball program up there has really taken off. The basketball program has been really, really good. It's, you know, top 10, top 15 every year level good for the most part. And see, that's the other thing. And I circled back with the source to make sure I understood this, that they had a legit shot at Danny White a few years back. And just, you know, in typical Vandy being Vandy fashion, these are the guys that are good enough for us, and these are guys that are not. And I think Danny White was on the doesn't fit Vandy list for whatever reason. And I just think that has exacerbated everything.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you on that. We're in a 5-year muck. And also, let's talk about blind luck. Let's take the women's basketball program. What they did with the bad hire with Stephanie White, at the time, none of us, which let's all be honest, we thought that may have been a good hire. But it was awful. Okay, but look at them now. Look at the luck they've had. 3 of their 5 starters are gone, and we haven't played a game yet. So what Shay Ralph is trying to do, and I think Shay Ralph is a good coach, look how it's set back already, and we haven't even thrown the ball out there yet. That's bad luck. That's all that is. I mean, what do you do there? You got 9 scholarship athletes, and you haven't played a game yet.
Yeah, I mean, the White thing we could get into for different reasons. I mean, the chatter on that immediately was that was a political hire, and that's where they went. And, embraced it and you got what you got. But anyway, yeah, I mean, and look, the men's has done the same thing too. The last time Vandy didn't have a key player hurt for half the season or more, I mean, that goes back into Kevin Stallings. So, yeah, there is an element of that it's just like, man, are they going to catch a break again at some point?
Exactly. And that's part of it. That's why these last 5 years have been so frustrating, because it's not just been football or basketball. It's been both the men's and women's programs and football.
Yeah, well, and yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, and just if you want to win a fun bar bet, the team that went winless in the SEC in basketball had the historic losing streak. 4 guys off that team played minutes in NBA last year, and you could see a fifth in Simi Chateau.
Yes.
But anyway, back on track. Let's just go ahead and grab the mailbag.
Sure.
The mailbag is sponsored by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call at 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Commodores94 says, are you seeing progress this year?
It's a bad time to ask that after the 3 weeks we just went through.
Yes, it is.
If you would have asked after week 3, I would have said yes. You ask after all 6 combined, all I look at would be the wins and losses. We're 3-3. I think when the season began, if I said, Chris, would you be happy to be 3-3 after your first 6? Everybody on here would have said yes. So let's just look at it from that standpoint and say yes, because we're 3-3. So after these next 6, and hopefully you'll still want to have me on after today, we can discuss it, because week by week it's going to matriculate, and we'll see if there was progress made.
Yeah, I think my answer before the season was something along the lines of I wanted to see like the sum of games they won plus games they had a shot at to win midway through the fourth quarter, no matter how it turned out from there. I think I wanted that number to equal maybe 5. So they're at 3, and my question is, does what just happened drag them down enough to where they can't mentally pull off the other 2?
My guess would be no, that it won't, just because I know Clark and I know him well. Now, I don't know some of his assistants well. I do know a lot of them well. They won't let it happen, because a couple of them have been through it themselves, Norval McKenzie and Javon Hay, and they never quit. So they can pull from that. The young kids are so resilient. Listen, they don't know what they had for lunch yesterday. So I'm not worried about the younger kids that play. It would be the guys that are seniors.
Yeah. Raiders 1967 says, thank you for dedicating your professional life to Vanderbilt athletics. Can you give your impression of Coach Lee when you knew him as a player?
Yes. Of course, everyone knows his story, so I won't get into that about him being a walk-on and all that. But Clark was a cerebral player, very smart, as you can imagine, very savvy, big team guy. He'd do anything that you had to do to win a football game on special teams or whatever he could. Limited in his ability. He was slow like I would be. But Clark was a great kid, great teammate.
This also from Raiders. What are former players you maintain contact with telling you about their impression of the football program, including former player outreach?
Well, I have so many players that come from different situations. I have friends that I talked to that were on those teams that beat Tennessee 3 in a row. And then I go back to the 70s, the teams that had success against Tennessee in 74, 75, like Dennis Harrison. It runs the gamut, as you can expect. You got some that say, I'm not coming back until we get better than this. This is unacceptable. And those are the ones that play when you're successful. Of the 6 or 7 years that we had what you call winning seasons. The guys that have been through similar times that we're going through right now, they understand it a little better because they were there when it happened. So I just think you have a huge gamut of different feelings, just like a fan base would be. And let me get off just a little bit here. and to me, the Vanderbilt fan, you got three different types that think, okay, if we go 1-11 and beat Tennessee, that's a good season. If we go 5-7, 6-6, that's a good season. And then you have the unrealistic ones that think we got to go 10 or 11 wins every year. So those are the three fan bases. Players are the same way. There's not much difference there.
Okay, Harley Hog 44. How long before Coach Clark Lee knows he needs to make a move for a new defensive coordinator?
I lived through this one with Woody Woodenhofer. He was a little farther along in his career, I believe. But, for some of you folks out there, you may remember Herb Patera, who he worked with at the Detroit Lions and hired him as a D coordinator. Herb was fantastic Monday through Friday, teaching them on the field. And I'm giving you my opinion, of course. I don't say I know everything, but I'm just showing you from all the times I've seen coaches. But on game day, it was too fast for him. When he was in the press box, it was too quick for him. On the sideline, didn't work because he needed to be upstairs where he could see what was going on. And I think Woody, when he took the keys to defense, we had a chance to win. If Woody would have stayed the defensive coordinator and the head coach, he'd have been more successful than he was. I don't think Clark's at that point yet. We'll know after Saturday. I think Saturday is a huge measuring stick for that defense.
Okay, J2M says, Luke, I've heard you say James Franklin was a bad fit at Vandy despite his ability to turn the program around. The administration was tired of him. Magoogan Center, of course, was tired of him, and he appeared to be frustrated with them as well. I think what Franklin did was leave the program with a blueprint of what it takes to win at Vanderbilt, which has been repeatedly ignored. That is, 1, young, enthusiastic, offensive-minded coordinator. 2, connections in the coaching world to bring in high-quality recruiters and assistant coaches. 3, most importantly, a cocky salesman willing to constantly be motivating and selling his vision to anyone who would listen and not take no for an answer. The last 2 hires have been opposite of the blueprint, and the results speak for themselves. Do you know why Vanderbilt keeps ignoring what worked?
Okay, and maybe I was misquoted or I said something the wrong way because here's my opinion on James Franklin. He was not going to be at Vanderbilt long, whether he won games or lost games. Dwight Galt and he made the decision to come there from Maryland on a whim. At the last second, they were not coming. The last second, Dwight basically talked James into it, is my understanding. And when they came, he's like, we're going to go there, fix that place up, win quick, and get out of there and get the next best thing. And that's a problem you're going to have at a Vanderbilt. And not just Vanderbilt. We need to be more like a Northwestern where you get a Pat Fitzgerald. What am I moving toward? Clark Lee, Pat Fitzgerald. I think they're very similar situations. And I think that's the problem with James. He was a bad fit because even if he came in and won every game we played, he wasn't going to be there long. So if you just want short-term success, he was your man. There's no question. But to make the program a consistent 5 to 7 win team, he was not the answer.
David Williams also went all in on him like I don't think have ever done with another coach. Is that fair to say? No. This is from me talking to you privately, but I just want you to maybe share some things here that I know we've talked about off pod.
Chris, I'm glad you brought that up because absolutely, James was given more than any 2 coaches, and I'm not exaggerating, that had been at Vanderbilt. He was given, and I'm talking about budget, my budget, just my little measly, whatever it was, budget for equipment at the time, doubled. Or really became, I say doubled, it really became, it doesn't matter, spend what you need. You tell me if you want it, you tell me if you need it, we're going to spend it. So that was totally different for me. I mean, I remember some coaches, they were questioning how many paper clips and Post-it notes they bought. So that's how different it was with James Franklin. It was going to be a David Williams, this is my guy, give him anything and everything he wants.
Yeah, how does that flip on a dime like that?
David just takes the heat if it doesn't work, and it was working, so he didn't have to take any heat. because we were winning. He didn't get questioned on campus. If James would have gone 4-8, I'm not sure Davey would have survived that. He stuck his neck out for it.
And then when Gillette happened, it was done, right?
Gillette happened. Listen, I was told on the way out the door, and I'm sure they were in the meetings when this was being discussed, told on the way out the door by coaches that left, that came down to say goodbye to me, Luke, I'm sorry you're going to have to go through what you're going to have to go through after this. And they were speaking of they're getting ready to pull the rug out from under football.
Yeah. Okay, poor Vandy fan 615. After improved offensive output in the exciting comeback win on the road at Northern Illinois, I had hopes for Vandy to possibly sneak an SEC win against a Missouri or South Carolina and play Kentucky and Florida fairly close, all of which seems less likely today as a longtime fan. It was demoralizing watching the lopsided losses of the past 3 games. I can't imagine what it was like for players and staff. Is there worry of the coaches and of the staff losing this team? How do coaches and staff keep players motivated after such tough consecutive losses at this point in the season?
I think you'll simply see, like I said earlier, after Saturday. That's just nothing I can answer right now because, as I mentioned earlier, I loved standing at that window after a horrible loss and watching the body language of kids as they came out to prepare, because you could lose this Saturday on a Wednesday practice this week. And that's where it has to be Clark's job to make sure that doesn't happen. But we'll know here when we talk next Monday, we'll be able to speak to where we are for the final 5 games.
Vandy Fitz says, do you think Lee in the 80s public mentions of a 10-year plan is a wise marketing tactic? While it was certainly good to attract a coach, it seems like poison for ticket sales over the 9 or 10 years after Lee started.
I don't read much into that. I'll tell you this: if ticket sales at Vanderbilt have been poor when they won. I can remember Coach Franklin when we were going to a bowl game, already a bowl game clinched, and we're getting ready to play the Wake Forest game after we'd beaten Tennessee. We look around and there still wasn't a full stadium. And he's like, what do you got to do here? Luke, you've been here a long time. What are we doing wrong? I said, you're doing nothing wrong. The fan base, number one, is small and getting smaller all the time. It has to be developed. How? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. Obviously winning. That's an easy answer. But I just feel like that you've got to somehow cultivate and get more fans in there and making it exciting. And the only way you do that is win games. It's that simple. So I don't think the 10-year thing, I don't read anything into that. He doesn't mean we're not going to have a winning season until year 10. I don't think he means that at all. But to have the program on solid ground is what he's saying, to where we're consistently, you go into a season expecting to go to a bowl or at least have a chance to go to a bowl your last couple of weeks.
Okay, Original Chai Door, my question for Luke, how much has the job of kitting out a major college football team changed since the years you started manning the cage? What would a state-of-the-art equipment room look like?
Well, it wouldn't look like what we got at Vanderbilt, I'll tell you that. They're actually, the equipment room, the square footage is smaller than when I was there, which is mind-boggling. They store things in the stadium and that type of thing. That's one of the things I fought for my last few years in Vanderbilt. And of course I was shot down was, hey, we got to have more space. This place is a junk pile because you didn't have the shelving, the floor had not been replaced. They replaced it right after I left. They did the things I asked for right after I left, which is typical. And, it's just the helmets, of course, the technology in the helmets changes year to year. There's just more of everything is the best way I can put it. The biggest change is more of everything.
How did the equipment room get smaller?
When they did the renovations to the locker room, they rearranged the way the equipment room is formed. In other words, the issue window and that type of thing has been moved. And then out in front of the equipment room in the hallway, there's like a, words where you get food. I'm forgetting the word here.
Sessions.
Where you can pick up, yes, right out in front of it, where you can pick up snacks and stuff like that for the guys and get their shakes and stuff like that. So that took some of their space so that it's actually smaller.
Wow.
Yeah.
Luke, that's it for the mailbag. Any insight or comments or things we didn't get to today?
No, I think we're all in the same, swimming in the same water. We're all sad that we've had these 3 weeks we had to go through. But I think if we look ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, we knew it was going to be bad, maybe not 55-0 bad and 55-3 bad, but we knew it was going to be bad. I think we're happy to get through it with, and I don't know this for sure, but fairly healthy, so that the rest of your games, which whether we win them or play close or whatever it may be, you at least got a shot from that standpoint. And I think having a kid, a freshman like A.J. Swan, calling the shots at quarterback, I really, really love that kid. I think he's got something different about him. And I think you're going to see him have a big game Saturday.
Yeah, I think that's the thing now. Because it's kind of gone from where there was a lot of excitement and things. I mean, I think you lose to Alabama badly. If that's a one-off thing, then people can kind of move past that and go on. But you had the, just the defensive collapses 3 games in a row. And now once you get to that point, like all the other stuff starts coming back, right? And now it's like, well, great. We'll lose the quarterback in the transfer portal and our best receivers and those things. That's the kind of stuff I'm seeing on message boards right now. Like I literally thought about doing just a show and reading you comments off the message boards and letting you react to them. I know you see them too. You're on our site. Just time didn't allow me to get that together today. But that's kind of where Vanderbilt football fan brain goes when it goes like this. And I think that's the thing that's disappointing. Like, man, I've done podcasts of bad sports for about 8 years now, other than baseball for the most part. And I think that was like, man, it was nice to have something else to talk about for a while. We had the first few weeks. And now it's like, it just seems like that zapped everything out of everybody. And it just feels like it's 2019 again.
Well, let's hope that's not the case. I don't think so. I guess we differ because I just feel like the kids are more resilient than we think. Now, if we were a veteran team, if this was a bunch of juniors and seniors, I would be very concerned. But because they're young and you play a lot of young guys, I don't think it's going to matter that much. I really don't.
Yeah, and you're probably. I'm just telling you what I see on my board, and I'm not on Twitter that much. So I don't know what was said there, but I know that this just took every bit of enthusiasm out of the fan base.
Absolutely, and it doesn't surprise me that it did. It doesn't take it out of me, and I guess maybe I had the luxury of being at Vanderbilt for 40 years. And I've seen how they pulled themselves up at times out of the gutter and come back and play a great football game. You just don't – you have no idea until you're over there what these kids go through and how hard they work. And if you have enough of them that still feel like, man, I've worked too hard to go out like this, then you can come down this stretch and you can play 6-foot football games. You're not going to play them all well, but you may play 1, 2, or 3 of them really well, and you feel a lot better about yourself and about the program when we're said and done this year. Yeah,
well, and let's not forget, what was it, in 2019, Missouri was the last team they beat. This seems hard to believe. That came a week after the 34-10 debacle to UNLV, which was so bad it fired its coach after the year. Missouri was 5-0 and ranked in the top 25. No, I hadn't played much of anybody, but like somehow that team in the middle of that, and never did anything again after that, by the way, was able to rally from that to beat a top 25 team. So it does happen.
Yeah, it does happen. You see it all around the country.
All right, Luke, thanks for joining us. We will talk to you next week after the Missouri game, win or lose. And man, I hope that it gets better. It would be nice to go back to talking about progress again rather than being at this point.
Well, I'll go ahead and stick my head out. I think it'll be better. I think we'll be. I'm not predicting we'll win, but I predict that we'll feel a lot better about things this time next week.
Well, either way, we will talk about it. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrislee70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrislee70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.